Hi and welcome to The Practice Gap, the podcast for closing the gap between the practice you have and the one that you want. I'm Elizabeth, a chiropractor, a business owner, coach and entrepreneur on a mission to help you move from frustration and overwhelm to clarity, focus and joy in practice. Welcome back, Bård Fossli Jensen.
Good to be back.
I'm so excited to talk more about patient communication. And in this episode, I'm thinking to go a little bit more in depth on how we as practitioners can become better at communicating, like some basic tips. Mm-hmm. But before I ask that, I would also, from all the training you've done with practitioners, what is the most common pitfalls? Like, what do we do wrong most of the time? Have you seen any?
Yeah, the patterns when it comes to, again, we have to be a bit more on the philosophical side. Biggest mistake most of us do, including myself, are, I don't even know it's a mistake, it's just a problem when it comes to communication skills training, is that we think when it comes to other kinds of training, for example, if you should learn a new procedure or how to take as simple as a venous blood test, for example, we all think that, okay, I haven't done this before, so I'll just learn the procedure, get someone to teach me that, and then I'll do it like that. And so we see that as a skill. But when it comes to communication skills training, very many of us think that this is about my personality, and every little feedback on the negative side goes straight to my personality, and then we feel useless, and that causes us to feel shame. And that's one of the biggest obstacles, that we don't see it the way it is. It's simply a skill. Yes. So that's one thing. And but when it comes to the skills, then what skills?
Where do I start? Where do we? If I've never been to any kind of training and you meet me and you're gonna give me your top 3 tips.
Yeah, and what I wouldn't give you those, because when people come straight into training, they're normally not susceptible to that. But I'll give them to you now anyway. And one common mistake is that we think that facts will work when we meet feelings, and they never do. Ooh. So if people say, oh yeah, I'm a bit skeptical to that manipulation of my neck, and you try to say, oh, but that's nothing to be skeptic about, it never works. Never works. So facts never works when you meet feelings. That's one thing.
Could you then do the example you said? Oh, I'm so skeptical about you manipulating or treating my neck. What's a good way for me to meet that when somebody says that?
Just say, yeah, of course you are. It's your neck. It's an important part of your body. Of course, you should be skeptic.
Yep.
And let that sink in, and then either see what the patients then say, or you could follow up. I normally just agree emotionally, say, of course you're skeptic. So would I be. Some people prefer to follow up. Okay, so what are your thoughts about it? Basically, it's a good thing to be a bit careful with your neck, but they have done that thought process already. Because if they don't think that, okay, I think it'll be a good treatment, they wouldn't have come. Mm-hmm. So just that agreement, emotional agreement, that you might call empathy, is to be preferred instead of, for example, premature reassurances. Say, oh, it's nothing to be skeptical about. This is totally safe. Just try to relax.
So meet a feeling with a feeling, not a feeling with a fact.
Yes.
That could be a pretty good advice for other kind of communication as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because people are people, and the psychology is the same if you're ill or wounded and a patient, or if you're at work or at home. Like, the psychology is the same. So yeah, it's good advice. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So I have the first one. What's the next one?
People generally talk too much. So what we see, for example, if you take a special skill, which is how to break bad news, like how to say something that people rather be without, we see that people muddy the water by talking too much. So learning the structure there is very helpful, both for the patient, because it's much easier to understand and they get more empowered and handle that new situation much better when you know how to say it. And it's much better for us healthcare professionals because we know that we have a good methods also when things are hard. So talking too much is a classic. And you asked for 3. Let me think. I'll be back on the structure. I think that improvisation is the key, and it's simply not. Structure beats improvisation every time, I would say.
Can you give an example? What's a structure consultation?
Yeah, let's go to the 4 phases then, so you get the big picture and then we can specify it perhaps. First of all, what we want is people to relax a bit, get their shoulders down. That's the first thing. And then we want to elicit their full agenda so we know what their expectations are. After that, we'll be interested in what their thoughts are about this, their perspective. Along with this, as soon as someone opens for something emotional that you can respond to, you have to be aware of your empathy, because unless you show some empathy or compassion, they won't feel that you care or that you've understood the importance of the issue. So we focus on empathy, and then we focus on how to package the information so we can make a good plan and agree on how to move forward. So that's the 4 big areas that we focus on and have a structure, and it would look something like this. Everything we do should be according to some basic psychological need we all have, like as human beings. And that is predictability, that you know what's going to happen is one. Overview, so you know what's going on around you. And that you have some kind of control of what the plans are. And so this lies as a base of this whole structure always. And still, to make it practical, we often start with something as simple as making people feel that we've been expecting them. And we do that by showing recognition. For example, saying the patient's name. So I'm looking for Alexander, okay? That means that they can feel that, okay, so they've been expecting me, makes them relax a bit. Then we introduce ourselves simply because overview is a good thing. And for anyone who's been in health as patient lately, know that there's a lot of people that you'll run into. So simply by stating that, yeah, I'm looking for Alexander, Bård is my name, I'm your doctor today, gives him the overview that, okay, so I know who this guy is. Then we apologize for waiting if we're late, because an apology from a person of authority is building trust. So I'll just say, sorry to keep you waiting if I'm late. And then to help even further, just people to get their shoulders down, we'll perhaps have a bit of a small talk then. So you found your way, just on our way into the office, and so we can find our places or sit down. And just know that small talk has that function, but also know when to stop is important then. The rule of thumb is that, okay, if you're going to small talk with your patients, make sure that you stop that by the time everyone has found their place or sat down. And then we elicit the patient's expectations for you today. So we'll say something like, okay, so I see you had your back pain, that's in my notes here. Before we get into that, what else have you been thinking about before you came here today? In case they have something else on their mind. It's very common that as doctors say, okay, we can only have one complaint at a time. If not, the list will go on forever.
The knee has to wait for tomorrow.
Yes. The problem is that if you do that, say, okay, only one thing, or we'll do that first, or you just get on to it, you leave the responsibility of prioritizing symptoms to the patient. And that's not okay, because they will very often prioritize things that hurt instead of things that has been there but is now asymptomatic, and which is natural, but a lot of things can be a lot more worrisome, even if not giving symptoms. For example, if I had one lady who said, yeah, since it's funny you should ask, because I just turned 70 and my daughters were worried about me because during that party they took me out to the kitchen and they asked me to smile and lift my hands, but now I'm okay. I just thought I'd mentioned it. And if that kind of information that they had, what do you call it, a TIA in Norwegian, like a small blood clot symptom of that, if that comes up at the end of the consultation, then you'll have to handle it then, and you spend all your time on a sprained ankle. That's not good. So we ask them about their expectations without promising that we'll look into it right now. We just get all their expectations up so that we then can prioritize. For example, wow, the information you got there, that worried me. And we have 20 minutes set aside today. I really would like to hear more about that. I'll also look at your ankle if we have time. And if we don't, we'll have to find a new time for that. Is that okay? So we negotiate in a good way how to spend our time. And you notice that we also set a time frame then. Because people are very respectful of other people's time as long as they have it up front. So saying that we have 30 minutes today, or we have 50, or we have 10 minutes today gives them a feeling of control, because it's a real control, and then we can agree on how to spend that time. And that makes it, we know that lowers the risk of conflict during the consultation, that we'll start having a small debate about how to prioritize, and it makes it easier to finish on time. That's the first part of the consultation. Then we help people relax a bit. We heard their expectations and we made a plan and we agreed about that. After that, we elicit their perspective. For example, I say, okay, so I'll probably have some doctor's questions, and I'd like to examine you carefully, and we'll see if we need any tests of any kind. And before we get to that, let me hear what your theories are about what has been causing this. And that's one of the key questions. Because when you ask that, people...
What are some of the, when you ask that, what are some of their thoughts? Like if a patient comes in, oh, my back is really painful.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. I can give you some examples, but what are their thoughts? True answers to that is, I don't know. That's why I ask. And why do we ask? Why is that important? For many reasons. We know it's really important to know their theories, because then you can tailor your treatment and your explanations to that. And it's also important because it's easy to think that our job is to fix biomedical problems. And then we forget that that's only half the job. The other half is helping people with their worrying or their thoughts, simply because the more the worry, the worse you feel. And the worse you feel, the longer it takes to get well. And it's directly connected to compliance. Because unless the patient feels that you understand what they've been thinking about, they can't really trust the advice you give. So that's why we ask, and still this sounds easy when I put it like that, because that's what you could read in any book as well. You should ask the patient, what do you think, or what's most important to you? And then it sounds like you just ask that and the patient will tell you. In real life, however, it's not that easy.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I need you to tell me that.
Exactly. So they'll say something like that. Or the most common answer is actually, I don't know. That's the most common answer. And the reason for that is simply because they haven't experienced a real cooperation with their healthcare professionals. So they don't really trust it yet. So in real life, we'll have to handle that. It helps that you've done the other things first, and so they can actually think that, okay, this is a nice person. It looks like he's actually interested in me. That makes it easier. But still, I often have to sort of double click a bit on that. So I say, so what do you think causes this? They'll say, well, I don't know. And then be able to say, yeah, and that's okay, because I don't know either yet. Yeah, because I haven't even checked your back, so how should I know? But agreeing to that, and then tell them that, but it's not exactly what I was asking. I didn't ask you if you know what has been causing this. I'm just really interested in your theories. And then you have to be interested then, okay? Because if you just ask this because it says on your post-it note there that you should ask it, it won't work. They'll sense that. And then they'll say things like, no, I think there's, I had one guy who said, I think there's a crater in there after one of those bolts that the orthopedic surgeon put in. And he said it was a crater there when he took it out. And then that's what I'm speaking. Okay, that's nice to know. Then you have pretty specific knowledge on how you see things. Or they'll say, no, I think there's just something that's in a nerve that's been squeezed. Yeah, squeezed between what? I have no idea. It just feels like that. Okay, when they start telling you that, you get an instant glimpse of their, what do you call that? Instant insight in their medical intellectual level. Is that an expression? So you understand how much medicine they understand, and that is a golden opportunity to tailor your explanation to their references and their models of understanding. If there's one advice that I'll give you, if you want to have more fun at work, because
we all want more fun.
Yeah, this is the question. Like, be really interested in their theories. What do you think has been going on in there? Because the truth is, can I give you another example?
Yes, please.
I have one good friend of mine. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and we studied together. He's a good friend of mine. And when I got so interested in this communication skills training, you know how that is when someone is really, really enthusiastic about it. It can be quite annoying. There's an expression that no one can spread such darkness as those who've seen the light. And I can understand. I can sort of have a feeling that I was turning into one of those people. But since he's a good friend of mine, he showed interest, and he said, I can see you're really interested in it. So, okay, give me some communication skills advice, he said. And I said, okay, how much advice do you want? And he said, 1. It's enough. 1. Okay. So I asked them, okay, so what's the, I hope there's not too many patients listening to this, because it's come from a good place, okay? But I asked him just to get his attention, what's the most boring consultation you have at your work? He said, well, that is to have polyclinic controls of hip replacements that someone else has done. So controlling other people's patients' hip replacement. That was, they didn't look at that as work. It was some kind of punishment, I think, at their workplace. So I said, okay, I'll give you one communication skill then that you can implement. And he even wrote it down. And I met him after 2 weeks, and he goes, wow, thanks a lot. That was cool. You have no idea. And I said, well, I think I do. But anyway, let me hear what happened. And he goes, yeah, I started asking all of them then. Miss Olsen, before we start today, let me just ask you, what do you think we've done in your hip, inside your hip there? And he says, and people have no idea. No idea. You wouldn't imagine. So it's fun to hear their theories. Mm-hmm. The important thing is that when things don't go as planned, we know this, when people are unsatisfied or skeptical or they're complaining, we know that normally one of two things that has been lacking up until that. One is empathy. People say, oh, it seems a bit half-hearted in a way. But the other is that we haven't been interested in their perspective. So we miss really, really basic things that you couldn't even imagine that you missed out on that. For example, one of his patients said that I think that when he put the hip prosthesis in, he didn't use that cement. He hasn't evened out the cement, so that cement causes fascia there to irritate that. And no one has ever listened to me, and no one is willing to fix that. And then my friend can go, wow, that is really good information, because it seems that we've done something wrong here. Okay, and what is that? We haven't explained to you that your hip prosthesis is one of those cement-free ones. So it's those kind of misunderstandings on so many levels that it's so easy to just clear, but you have to ask them.
Good.
So that was the patient perspective. Then, of course, we have to know your own feelings and be able to express empathy. For example, people say, yeah, but I'm just so sick and tired of all this training. I don't think I can have another session at my physiotherapist, for example. What do you say then? That's a feeling, right?
Yeah. I'm so tired of all this time.
They're overwhelmed and exhausted. Do you go for facts then and say, yeah, but you have to train to get better.
3 times a week, 20 minutes.
It is important. You can't give up now. Do you go with that, or do you go with empathy? And I'd advise you to go with empathy.
How would that look?
No, something like, yeah, of course you're sick and tired of all the training after everything you've been through. No wonder. And let that sink in. Because unless you do that, they will not feel that you've understood the importance of their fatigue. And unless you can empathize with them and put words to it, they won't feel that you care, because feelings is the signature of that something is important. So we have to be able to do that. And for most of us healthcare professionals, it's easy to improve, to put it that way. And I think it's because of the heritage we've had from like up until the 60s, like we talked about in the last episode, where the ideal healthcare professional was someone who did not express any feeling at all.
Yeah, the dead body.
yeah, look at it with the same emotional distance as a dead body. Oh. No, so you actually practice that. And it's not very hard. It's just that we connect, say, okay, how would you feel if it was your spouse or someone you care about? And they'll say, yeah, I'll feel it. That's my feeling. And then you just let that out. So, yeah, of course you're tired. But you have to picture it from their perspective. And it doesn't take any time at all. And it's so important. And the good news is that when we evaluate doctors that we did the research on, and to see how empathic are they, and to get 100% score on empathy, if they could say, come with one empathic expression like that, that'll be 100% score. So it doesn't, and that takes a second, does it? And still we see that that is an easy way to improve a lot. To do that, then you, of course, do your examination, your physical examination, maybe you do some treatments, and then we go into the finishing phase of the consultation, where it's about summing up what you found, giving them, for example, it seems to me like there's some irritation on your lower back there, and with one of the big nerves going down to the leg, okay? The ischius nerve, you can add to that, but you'll put the level of explanation to what he told you before, like. So what I suggest is that you keep in motion, and you can also have some anti-inflammatory or painkillers. What would you prefer? I have a couple of suggestions here. You've probably heard about ibuprofen and paracetamol. Get them at least involved. Then we check for understanding by having they say out loud the important things you think this consultation has been about. So we don't examine them by saying, okay, so just so I understand, just so I know that you've understood this, we take it up on ourselves to check to what degree we've been able to explain things. So you could say something like, just to be sure that I have explained myself good enough.
So I put it instead of like, check, I would say, just to to check that I've explained myself good enough.
Yeah, something like that. Because it is our responsibility anyway. So that I've explained myself good enough. Could you just tell me what are the most important things you take home after today? And if they can then, and be very generous about giving them a pass on that sort of examination then. So if they can say something like, okay, so you think it's safe simply because I still have control, I can walk and everything works out, including how I go to toilets. So it's important that I do some exercise and I can have some anti-inflammatory pills. But if it should get really worse, or I get problems with either going to the toilet, paralysis or something, then I have to call you immediately. I think, yeah, you're good to go. But you have to make them actually say it. It's unbelievable what people misunderstand simply because we have given too much information on a level that they weren't ready for. And then we get the misunderstandings.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try and sum up a little bit.
Yeah. So,
let's see if I pass now.
Yeah, just to be sure that I explained myself well enough, could you run us through what you take away from this episode?
So my takeaway from this episode, it's you need a clear structure, and you need to say that you're expecting the patient in the waiting room. You have to tell your name. You have to do a little small talk, and it should stop when we are actually sitting down or something. And then it's all about getting the patient what they've been like worrying about. Mm-hmm. And then make an order to see what's important for them, and make a decision on what's important for this consultation, and give a time frame. Mm-hmm. And then to make practice more fun, we should be better at asking the patient, so what do you think causes, or what do you think the cause of the problem is?
Yeah, what are your theories?
Theories, what are your theories?
What does your wife think?
What does your wife think's going on in your back? And then actually be interested and shut up and listen to give them time enough to think about it. And then, of course, do the stuff we do. And then important part before they leave, there was tons of other important stuff in between here, the whole structure of the consultation. But the most important thing is to recheck they actually got the biggest things from the take-home message.
Yeah, if there's something that is important, you think is important that they know, you have to hear them say that.
Yeah. So if I want to tell my patient that, make sure they know that they're supposed to walk and use size or something like that.
Which is important.
Yeah, which is important. Then I would say, well, just to recheck that I was able to give you the information you need. Could you just tell me back the most important things from this session?
Yes.
Something
and
like
be very generous about giving them a thumbs up, and very generous.
Perfect. You got it all right.
Yeah.
Yep. Does that sound kind of sum of it up?
Do that, and even and we know about it. Even if you just remember parts of this, like one or two things, it'll improve the consultation a lot. So my advice would be, if you think any of these skills sounded interesting, pick one, maximum two that you think will be easy for you to do in your general practice, your practice, and start practicing those.
Yes. So then the advice I'm going to give my listeners or listeners today is to pick one thing and have fun with that in practice, and then go back and listen to this podcast once again. And then you can pick another one. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Well, I'm super lucky, so I'm going to have Bård back for one more deep dive into patient communication, and I cannot wait.